As we know that every story teaches us a lesson. Today I have a beautiful story through which we can learn a lesson, but a different one. It's the story of a man, Abu Mohra, an Omani young man who was a soldier in the Omani armed forces in the 90s. Now this man decided to marry. He was searching for someone suitable and he didn't want to marry a traditional, or I would say an arranged marriage. That is through the family. He wanted to choose his life partner, I would say. He was employed with a good salary. That is, he had the capability to marry and have a family. The family members suggested that why wouldn't he marry one of his cousins? He was convinced, I would say, that the girl he wanted to marry was from a simple family, loving, polite. He did ask people who knew her and her family, and they really praised her. Still, the parents tried their best by convincing him to marry his cousins or one of the close family members. But he was determined. Therefore, they said, God bless you. This is your choice and this is your life. Thus, we hope you make the right choices. The parents here gave their opinion on their experience in life, but they said, well, if you made this decision and if you think it's right, go on. He, alongside with his family members, went with the proposal and the girl accepted it. And they got married. At the very beginning of his life, he lived a very simple life, a modest apartment. His salary actually met their needs and more. So he started saving money. At least for 2 to 3 years, he gave up on the, we would say, extra expenses and started saving. And then he got a huge surprise for his wife. He said that he has purchased a land. As I said, he didn't spend much on himself just to make this dream turn into a reality. His intention was to build a house. But the land he bought was now double its worth. So he decided to buy another land after selling to make humongous profits. This comes as a matter of experience. Now he started buying and selling and became an expertise in sale. And he knew that to buy the best place or plot according to his money and budget and make profit out of it. Land after land, he then bought a house. Or I would say a palace, actually. Abu Mohra was a man of his word, a person, I may say, with good attitude and manners and generosity. He helped everyone in need, from his family and especially from his wife's family, her parents, that is, her parents or her brothers. Why? Because they lived a simple life. They were almost poor, I would say. They lived in a modest house, an old one, and they didn't have even much to get married. But here, Abu Mohra was the one to pay all the expenses. He was able to help them all get married. This man was successful. Of course, may glory be to God. Any specific plot he bought would be bought with major profits. He had sons and daughters, and God provided him with a very comfortable life. After years in 2014, he was one of the richest men in his city. But life took a turn, and a weird one. Abu Mohra was sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment. And why would he? I mean, a God-fearing man like him, there has to be a reason. Now, the reason was a very minute misunderstanding on buying or selling of a land, in which the government officers got involved. So there was a dispute. Abu Mohra and some other people were having a conversation, and during this conversation, Abu Mohra lost his temper, and he did hit one of the workers or the officers in the government field. Assaulting a government employee is a crime, and the law punishes the most severe punishment for doing so. So he was sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment. Even the employee refused to concede. His wife and children used to visit him from time to time. But he didn't commit, I would say, a crime for which his children they thought the matter was not worth it. But this is the law and this is how it goes. That's it. What happened had happened. And here his wife started complaining that he owned lands and plots and had money in the bank. And here his children were left with nothing actually, and they couldn't cover their expenses. They didn't have any idea how to deal with the business also. So everything was like on a pause. He couldn't earn money, but he did have money in the bank that could make them live for 5 years or more. Because they were never involved in the business on such a thing, so how would they live and manage the 5 years of him being in the prison? The wife here asked her husband, "Do you trust me?" He answered, "Of course." She said that, "Why don't you give me the power of attorney?" The power of attorney to withdraw what she needed, the monthly expenses, and she could also buy and sell lands and plots. And he can guide her and she can manage and go to the real estate offices and deal with it. She could take complete care of the business in his absence. And indeed, he did give her the power of attorney in the presence of a lawyer from the Ministry of Justice. But as they say, trust is fragile. The catastrophe and shock that happened after Abu Muhra gave the power of attorney was about to occur. Now the wife visiting him, the number of times kept on decreasing. Once a month, once every 2 months, with the children, without the children. It seemed that she had no interest in visiting her husband anymore. She was not the same. After 3 years had passed by since this case, a letter from the court arrived to the prison and prison administration, and it was that she had filed the case of divorce. Of course, it was hard to believe. This man was rejecting the truth, which was in front of his own eyes. Divorce papers. She did visit him for days and seemed normal. Yes, she did reduce her visits, but she didn't complain. He was, of course, in a state of confusion and denial that what could be the reason. When did she actually register the case? And it should have been filed at least 3 months ago. He gave a call to his brothers, asking them to contact his wife to know what was going on. After months at the time of hearing, she submitted a letter to the judge stating that her husband had been imprisoned for 5 years. She wanted divorce. The cause was detriment, damage. The truth is that the divorce would be implemented because he is in the prison. But how about the other factors? Abu Muhra knew that something was wrong. After 9 months of imprisonment, he was released. That is 3 years and 9 months. The quarter term was reduced. Anyways, the first thing that came in his mind were his children and his wife. Of course, he wanted to know the truth. She had lived like a queen with him. What could have gone wrong? He went to her, but he didn't find her. She didn't answer the door. He then went to her brothers in order to that they would unite them as a family and that he could return to his house. But they replied, "What house?" I would like to say Abu Muhra is not the name of Abu Muhra. Abu Muhra means Muhra, his daughter, and Abu means father, means he's the father of Muhra. So Muhra here would be the mother of Muhra. Now the man went mad. He went to the Ministry of Justice, and if you don't believe, he said that go to the Ministry of Justice. The house was registered on her name. And of course, according to the power of attorney, she has the right to do so. He checked the other properties. So he had to go and see if they're still on his name, but it were transferred. All the properties he had were transferred in the name of her brothers and herself. this woman took advantage of her husband being in the prison and his trust. It was a huge scam. The properties of her that belonged to Abu Mohra was distributed among her brothers, and they actually were supporting her. Therefore, his only hope was his bank account. If he had money in his account, he could file a case or at least move somewhere or build himself. But he did go to the bank, and here he was left with nothing. He had to go and complain and file a case against the bank itself. But the bank revealed that the way of withdrawal of the money was through the process of power of attorney. He filed a case against his wife. People around him, means I would say that he was a businessman because he was buying and selling lands and properties. So people around him were shocked, and they were shocked too, that Abu Muhra was bankrupt. Is that even possible? Him asking people to help him pay for the lawyers? After months, the case that Abu Muhra had filed against his wife, he lost. He lost the case. The reason? The judge asked, was the general power of attorney forged? He said no. The judge asked, are the signatures on the power of attorney forged? He said no. The law doesn't protect the fools. He couldn't have given her the power of attorney, or he could have, but for a specific task, for a specific time, or could, until whatever extent of time, to use it to withdraw specific amount of money and so on, or to sell a specific land within the period that you can do that. When a person assigns someone for the power of attorney, you can actually mention what it can be used for and what not. But again, if you do so, you will suffer or bear the consequences. That means years of marriage and children. What we know that long relationships makes strong bonds of trust and loyalty. So why? Mohra, as they said, she had a weak personality and listened to people very easily. Now, there are women who love destroying relationships. For them, it's a hobby. As we can see, an idle mind is a devil's workshop, and if they're not the devil themselves. So these people these women, mostly actually, cannot see or bear the happiness of others. So their aim is to do so. Destroy relationships. Her sisters and the wives of her brothers, these were the ones who were guiding her, and maybe her friends too. Why would you wait for someone in the prison who has been with other prisoners, and maybe his way of life, his character would change, or maybe he would marry again to a younger woman to start a new life after he comes out of the prison? Why would he wait for you? So you shouldn't wait for him. It's not that. Why would she listen to people? Again, it's a matter of trust. So they said that you should be careful, you should do something, that you would live a long, good life with or without him. And how? You can go and actually ask him to give you the power of attorney. This was an opportunity for her. It was an opportunity to register the house itself. So as I said, the woman here now had everything she needed. She was not in need of her husband anymore. But Abu Mohra here was left with nothing. In 2019, of course, the only thing left in his life were his children. So he said he would contact his kids. And he actually called his daughter, Mohra. He got in contact with her, and he said that how much he missed her. And here maybe the children, in such cases, don't know that the father would try his best to meet his kids or to get in contact with him and It's not always the father who would be the bad person. But they were not in contact. They had no idea. And children are children. You cannot blame them. Here, the daughter really was happy and delighted to hear from her father and asking where he had been. She knew that he was in the prison, but then what happened? She gave him the address, and the address here was a new one. And he was like, "Why, you're not in your old house?" She said, "No, this is our address. We have changed our house." Of course, he arrived. He went as fast as he could, and when he arrived, he was shocked. The area was quite old, or I would say old houses, and he couldn't believe his eyes, and he had something in mind. He thought maybe the kids don't want to see him near his wife or ex-wife. Maybe they wanted to see him in a different place, so they had decided to meet in this specific house. So, according to the address, the house was a very old one. When she opened the door, she started crying after seeing her father at the very moment. And they met each other. They were very happy to see each other. And the father said, "Dear, it's okay. Why couldn't you see me in your original house? Why did you have to rent a space to meet me?" She said, "No, father, this is our house. This is where we live. And actually, it's not a house. It's like a section or an apartment in the house that they have rented." And he said, "Why? Where's your mother?" She said, "She's inside. She's in the house." Then she said, "Dad, you don't know what happened?" Now she said the whole story, that her uncles, and when she decided to get the power of attorney, all of a sudden her brothers were, "What are you doing? This is your husband." But the moment she said that, "Well, I'm not the only one who is going to take the house or the money. I can distribute the other things within you. You are my brothers. You're my family." And then all of a sudden they said, "Okay." They took the properties, she took the house and the money. When they took the land, they wanted to build their own houses. And during the time period they were building their houses, they needed more money. So they decided, why don't they ask their sister or trick her into selling the house? That way they can get more money to finish their own properties. They went to her saying that, "Sister, your husband has filed a case. So maybe you'll be in danger, and they will actually take your house from you and whatever you have, and you'll be left with nothing, literally nothing." And she was, of course, scared. She said, "No, please help me. This cannot happen. I mean, if he comes back and takes everything, I'm left with nothing." They said, "Why don't you just transfer or register your house onto the name of one of the brothers? And that way you can live in the house and, of course, nothing will happen." And she did so. She started helping them financially too, trusting that her brothers will take care. But I don't get the point. If you were not worth your husband's trust, how would you be worth anyone's trust? Or how would someone trust you? She transferred or registered the house, and she was, of course, left with nothing. And later, when they sold the house, here, of course, the person who bought the house came and said that you have days to leave the house. And she said, "Why would I leave my house? And who are you?" He said, "I'm the one who has bought the house. And here you go. These are the papers. And you have to leave within few days." She was in shock. I would say she was in more of a shock than what Abu Mohra was in. Because for Abu Mohra, it was his wife. And here we are talking about the relationship of a brother and sister, which is, everything is different. Every relationship has a different value, has a different, you don't expect this. But of course, everything changes. So what happened here? That she had to get out of her house within days, and she couldn't find any place, and she didn't have that kind of money because she was helping financially her family members. So she rented this place where Abu Mohra had met Mohra. What kind of lesson can we learn from such kind of story? In the very beginning, I said it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story not because I think it's funny to what happened to Mahra. It's different because it happens a lot and people do lose trust. And I would say again, as I have said before, trust is a huge word. Think twice, think thrice. And if you're not comfortable, don't do it. Just don't do it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.